I used to think I was cursed for being born first. When my mom held my little brother for the first time, she told me, "From now on, you have to be a role model for your brother." But it wasn't a lesson. It was a lifelong sentence. If I cried, I was too sensitive. If my brother screamed, he was just expressing his emotions. If I failed, it was shameful. If my brother failed, it was, at least he tried. My story didn't begin with a major event. It started with 1,000 tiny cuts. Every time I was seen as not good enough, while my brother was forgiven without question. My name is Harper. I'm 35 years old and I grew up in a small town in Oregon, where there were more pine trees than opportunities. My family wasn't poor, but we weren't well off either. My dad worked in the warehouse for a local shipping company. My mom taught part-time English at the middle school. To the neighbors, we were the perfect family. A hard-working couple, 2 well-behaved kids, and a red-roofed house with a little front yard. But only those living inside that house knew how rotten things really were. I was born 6 years before my brother Mason, and from the moment Mason cried for the first time, I stopped being a child. I became the big sister who had to set an example. I remember clearly when I was 8. My birthday was cancelled because I got less than an A- in math. That same year, Mason destroyed Mom's paintbrush collection, and she just sighed and said, "He's going through a discovery phase." Once, I stayed up studying until almost midnight for midterms. When I got the highest score in class, Dad just said, "Good, but you need to keep it up." A week later, Mason got kicked out of class for talking back to a teacher, and my mom baked his favorite pie and hugged him like she was the one who'd been hurt. That feeling, like I was being punished for doing nothing wrong. If I was good, I made Mason feel bad. If I worked hard, I made Mom feel pressured on his behalf. While I joined the debate team, wrote for the school paper, and helped Mom wash dishes every night, Mason spent his days glued to his game console, skipping school, and always had an excuse about emotional issues. The summer I turned 15, I worked at an ice cream shop to buy SAT prep books. Mason, who was only 9, lost the expensive phone Dad had just bought. I clearly remember Mom saying, "I'm not mad, everyone slips up." I slipped up once, broke a porcelain bowl my grandma gave us, and was grounded for a whole month. Every time I was recognized at school, like when I won a senior year scholarship, Mom always reacted the same odd way. "Hope you don't show off too much, Mason might feel bad." She never hugged me and said she was proud, not once. Every achievement I had was filtered through one lens. Would it make Mason feel inadequate? I learned to suppress my own joy. I stopped talking about what I'd accomplished, stopped sharing happiness, stopped asking anything of my parents. Because whenever I did, I was accused of being selfish, of bragging, of hurting my brother. And worst of all, I believed it. I believed I was responsible for my brother's feelings. I believed I wasn't allowed to make mistakes. I believed love in a family came with conditions. Conditions that required me to sacrifice, stay quiet, and carry the weight. Christmas, when I was 17, I asked the family to attend a musical where I had the lead role. Mason didn't want to go because it was boring, so they all stayed home to watch a movie with him. I stood backstage, stared at the empty seats, and performed like nothing was wrong. When I came home, Mom just said, "You did well, didn't need anyone watching." That's when I began to understand. It's not that I didn't deserve love. It's just that, in this family, I was never seen as someone who needed to be loved. I left home one morning in June. No tears, no goodbyes. No one asked where I'd live, if I had enough money to eat, or if I needed help. My dad said only one thing as I dragged my cheap suitcase down the porch steps. "If you're leaving, you're on your own." And my mom? She just stood in the kitchen, back turned, chopping onions like I never existed. I was 18 years old, had an acceptance to Cal State Long Beach, and not even $1,000 in savings. Scraped together from 3 years of scooping ice cream, babysitting, and writing freelance articles for the local school district's paper. That was all I had to start a new life. The first room I rented was a converted old dorm room on the third floor of a crumbling building in Orange County. It smelled musty and had a cracked window. I shared it with Naomi, an architecture student who taught me how to breathe deeply when my bank account showed $5 and tuition reminders screamed in my inbox. I went to school during the day and worked at night. In the mornings, I poured coffee at a small street corner cafe. In the evenings, I served tables at a packed Mexican restaurant. Between shifts, I buried myself in coding books, drowning in Python and JavaScript like they were my only ticket out of the pit my family called tradition. While I stretched myself thin just to survive, Mason, the golden boy of the McKinley household, still lived comfortably in the upstairs bedroom of our parents' home. He was 20 then, supposed to be in school or working. Instead, he played video games all day, changed majors 3 times, and dropped out of everything. When I asked Mom about it, she just said, "He's finding his path. Not everyone knows what they want like you do." Like I was lucky to have direction, and Mason just needed more time for self-discovery. At 21, I officially graduated college after 4 grueling years. No congratulations from my parents, no flowers, no letter. I sent invites, they didn't come. Mom texted a short message. "Congrats, don't forget to call your brother." I didn't call. And I no longer cried over things like that. I got hired at a mid-size software company in San Jose, starting from the bottom, tech support. While working, I took cloud system certification courses. At night, I studied project management. I had no choice but to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Meanwhile, Mason, now 23, still hadn't finished any program. My parents bought him a used Ford to make it easier for job interviews. 3 months later, the car broke down. He couldn't keep any job for more than 4 weeks. When I asked, Mom said, "He's sensitive, he can't handle toxic environments." I thought about the environments I worked in. Scrubbing restrooms at 1 o'clock a.m., cleaning up after drunk customers, attending classes until 11 o'clock p.m., then riding a freezing bus home. But I said nothing. Because if I did, I'd be accused of nitpicking my brother. When I moved into a small apartment in Sunnyvale near my job, my mom called me for the first time in nearly 6 months. Not to ask how I was. She wanted money to help Mason pay for an online coding course. "Just $1,200, Harper, that's not much for you." I froze. That same amount had once meant a month of instant noodles, emergency loans from nonprofits, and begging for scholarships just to pay my own tuition. But I bit my tongue and sent it. Because I still had hope that if I just kept being kind, they would see I was part of the family too. The biggest mistake of my life was waiting for recognition from people who never intended to give it. At 28, I officially became a product development team lead. I bought my first car, a used Subaru. I sent Mason a laptop after hearing from Mom that his was broken. 6 months later, I saw that same laptop listed on Craigslist. Like new, barely used. When I asked Mom, she said, "It didn't suit him." Don't be upset. Didn't suit him? I had spent nearly $1,500 on that thing while still eating cheap sandwiches every lunch to save. The year Mason turned 25, I got a call from Mom. "Can you help with his rent for a few months? Your dad and I are tight on money. He's still looking for a job." I laughed. At the time, I was standing in a conference room, fresh off signing a new project management contract, with nearly a 40% raise. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the first time I ever heard the phrase, "tight on money," used by my parents. And of course, it was only ever about Mason. I used to believe that hard work would make them see me as someone worthy, but now I understand, in their eyes, I was nothing more than a convenient money printer. And Mason? No matter how many times he failed, he was always the boy who needed protection. I once thought, if I was good enough, patient enough, they would eventually understand. But no, in my family, kindness wasn't something to be appreciated. It was something to be drained. After I sent rent money when Mason was 25, I planned to step back. I didn't want to keep being the one cleaning up the mess every time my brother tried to find his path and fell. But less than 3 months later, Mom called. Again. "Harper, could you help Mason buy a new car? The old one's completely dead. He needs transportation for job interviews." I had just finished a day of endless meetings. My brain felt like it had been slammed against a wall. I was sitting in the car, not even buckled in yet, when I heard Mom's soft voice turn into pleading. She sounded like she was talking about a 3-year-old, not a grown man. "Just a few thousand, Harper. You're doing well. It probably doesn't mean much to you. A few $1,000s? I used to live off instant noodles for a month just to pay my tuition." But I didn't say that. I just stayed silent. "Family is about helping each other during hard times, right?" she continued, and I felt my throat tighten. That sentence. That old phrase, "family comes first." It no longer sounded like a reminder of love. To me, it was an invisible handcuff, tightening around my wrists every time I tried to escape the cycle. I said no. Gently, politely, but firmly. A few days later, I received an email from Dad. Subject, "A few words from a father's heart." The content? A 2-page accusation about ingratitude, family values, and a daughter who forgot where she came from. "If it weren't for your mom and me, how would you have what you do today?" he wrote. "Are you going to let your brother keep drifting forever? You really can't help him even just a little, Harper." I let out a dry laugh when I read the last part. "We don't want anything from you. Just remember that blood is forever." How ridiculous. They always don't want anything until they want everything. I didn't reply, but I knew that was only the beginning. From then on, every few months there was another emergency. Mason got robbed, needed money to replace his laptop. Mason was unemployed, needed help paying off credit card debt. Mason broke up with his girlfriend, needed a place to stay and an advance on a new apartment. Mason wanted to enroll in a very promising startup boot camp, just needed to cover a $2,000 fee. Each time I refused, Mom returned to the same old tactics. Said I was cold. Said I'd become successful and forgotten my roots. Said I was abandoning my own blood. "If you were in trouble, Mason wouldn't hesitate to help you," she once wrote. I almost laughed out loud. Mason once used my credit card when he stayed with me for a few weeks during the summer I was 24, and maxed out $300 I'd saved to pay the electric bill. I had to postpone car repairs to cover it. But no one ever mentioned that. In my parents' eyes, Mason was always a boy who was trying. And me? Even in my 30s, I was still too tough, lacking compassion. One time, I was on a business trip in Denver. I had just walked into the hotel when Mom called. She was crying, saying Mason's landlord was threatening to evict him for missing rent. I asked, "Is he working yet?" "No, he's still looking, but it's not his fault. He's under a lot of pressure." "Mom, when I was 26, I worked 2 jobs, slept 3 hours a night, and never asked you for a dime. That's because you're strong. Mason's different. He's more fragile. He needs us." I hung up mid-call. Not out of anger, just exhaustion. I was tired of being the villain every time I didn't pull out my wallet. I was tired of every favor being treated as a duty, never as a kindness. I was tired of playing the big sister who was never allowed to say no. One time I visited Aunt Ann, Mom's younger sister, someone I rarely saw because the family always said she was stubborn. During lunch, she looked at me and asked directly, "Are you tired, Harper?" I nodded. She said only one sentence. "You can't keep feeding a lame horse and then blame it for not running." I sat quietly in the car after that meal, and for the first time, I asked myself, am I enabling Mason by helping our parents cover for him? I was in my home office finishing a quarterly report for an upcoming director meeting when the phone rang. The caller ID said, "Mom." I hesitated for a second, then picked up. The last time she called directly was nearly a year ago, to ask if I could pay for Mason's car repairs. "Harper, sweetheart," she began, voice sugary sweet. The kind of sweetness that made me immediately stiffen, because I knew something rotten always followed. How's work going? Still at that big software company, right? I tilted my head, quietly sarcastic. I'd been with Lucentrix for over 6 years, in senior management for nearly 2, and she still couldn't remember the name? I'm fine. What do you need, Mom? Oh, nothing. I miss you. It's been a while since we talked. What do you want? I cut in. I knew that tone too well. There was a short pause. Then her voice dropped, shaky like she was about to cry. I closed my eyes. I knew the blow was coming. It's Mason. He's in trouble. Serious this time, Harper. I gripped the phone tightly. Mason. Again. He borrowed a large sum, $40,000. From the wrong people. They're starting to threaten him. I sat up straight. 40,000? I tried to stay calm. Why did he borrow that much? That's not important right now, Harper. What matters is his life is being threatened. Do you understand? I scoffed. Not important? A 30-year-old man takes out a loan the size of a house down payment, and my mother thinks it's not worth discussing? What do you want me to do? Help him pay it off. Just this once. I know you can. You're the most successful in the family. You've always been strong. But Mason, he's not like you. He can't handle pressure like you can. I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window. At the quiet house I spent nearly a decade working to afford. The car parked out front was my reward for years of early mornings and late nights. Everything around me came from my own effort. No support. Not a dollar from family. And now my mother wanted me to take $40,000, my emergency savings, my future security, and throw it into the bottomless pit called Mason. No, Mom. My voice was soft, but firm as steel. I can't, and I won't. That moment felt like pressing the detonation button on a bomb. My mom's voice instantly changed. No more gentleness, no more pleading. Only cold fury, sharp as a blade. You're really that selfish? Your brother could be killed and you refuse to help him? I'm not responsible for his terrible decisions, I replied, my hands starting to tremble. You really want to see your own brother's blood spilled, just because you're too stingy to open your wallet? I choked up, not because I was convinced, but because I was stunned. For the first time in my life, my mother threw a graphic, bloody image on the table. Like a knife to my throat, to force my surrender. You're blaming me if something happens to Mason? Who else will save him if not his sister? The only successful one, the only one capable, and she's the one abandoning him. No, the only one being used, treated like a walking ATM, that's me. A deadly silence filled the call. I continued. I've helped. I've given money. I've swallowed my anger for years. I used to think that if I sacrificed enough you'd finally acknowledge me, but no, you just wanted more. Again and again. Don't play the victim. Your father and I raised you, taught you. Without us, you wouldn't be where you are today. No, Mom. I am where I am because I chose not to live like Mason. I chose to be responsible, to be independent. And now, I choose to say no. My mom started shouting, but I couldn't hear it clearly anymore. My heart was pounding, chest on the verge of bursting. Then I hit the end call button. My hand trembled as I set the phone on the table, not out of fear, but because for the first time I said no, and stood by it. I thought everything was over after that call. I had been firm, I had refused. I had hung up and held my ground. But I forgot one important thing. My family doesn't know how to accept the word no. 3 days later, I received a call from the security department at Wellsbury Bank, where I kept all my savings and personal investments. The woman's voice was calm, but every word felt like a knife to the chest. Hello, Ms. Harper McKinley. We detected suspicious activity on your account at 3:12 a.m. from an unfamiliar IP address in the Portland suburbs. The individual correctly answered 3 security questions: your first pet's name, your elementary school, and your mother's birth date. I went numb. Not just any hacker would know my first cat was named Pickle, that I went to Jefferson Elementary, and that my mom was born on November 4th. Only someone in the family would know that. Only Mason. Was there a transfer request? I asked, voice dry. Yes, ma'am. There was a request to transfer $17,800 to an account under the name J.M. Walters. However, the system flagged it as potential fraud and blocked the transaction. Fortunately, no funds were processed. I hung up, cold sweat breaking down my back. My hands shook as I opened my laptop to change all passwords, enable two-factor authentication across all accounts. Then I called my company's IT department and requested a full sweep of both personal and work devices, isolating everything from the internal network until I could be sure it wasn't compromised. I wasn't angry anymore. Not furious. Only hollow. Like a bottomless pit inside me. Jason. My brother. The same boy who cried when he lost my wallet at 15. The one who promised to grow up after every mistake. Had now actively tried to steal the money I'd spent nearly a decade saving. Not borrowing. Not asking. Stealing. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mason's hands typing in my login. Like a stranger. Like a thief sneaking into my life in the dark. On the 4th day, I got a call from Aunt Ruth, my dad's sister. Someone who rarely got involved in family matters. Harper, I heard bits and pieces. Your mom's been telling everyone you abandoned your brother while he was on the brink of death. I gripped the phone, heart racing. What else did she say? She's saying, you're living in luxury with your own house, your own car, 6-figure savings. But you refuse to share with your brother, who's being threatened daily. I let out a bitter laugh. Auntie, he just tried to hack into my bank account, nearly took $18,000. Aunt Ruth fell silent. I told her everything, from the call asking for $40,000 to the account breach, and the truth that I had always been the financial shadow behind this family. She said nothing for a long moment, then sighed. They're not the people I used to know, Harper. That night I printed out all evidence of the hacking, bank reports, IP address logs, the recipient account name, and filed it all into a personal folder. I sent a copy to my attorney, though I wasn't planning to file charges, at least not yet. I also completely blocked all communication from my mom, dad, and Mason. No calls, no texts, no emails. I created a new email address for work and updated every piece of personal security information. With every step I took, I felt lighter. As if I was cutting loose a rope that had been choking me for over 30 years. But then, something strange happened. One night, I got a message from Mason's ex-girlfriend, Alyssa. I know we've never been close, but I thought you should know this. Jason's been acting really strange. He keeps muttering things like, I need to get back what's mine, they owe me, I'll teach them a lesson. I don't know what's going on, but it's not good. I sat in the dark, hand gripping my phone tightly. I used to think I was just protecting my accounts. Now I realized I needed to protect myself. I thought the account breach was the peak of it all. But it turns out, it was just the beginning of another storm. One that didn't go after my money, but after my reputation. Just 1 week after I cut off all contact and locked down every account, I started getting strange messages from relatives. A cousin in Florida, someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade, messaged me. Harper, what's going on? I heard your brother almost got assaulted over dead and you refused to help? A cousin on my mother's side sent me a direct link to a public Facebook post from my mom, tagged with my full name. There are people born into a family who choose to turn their backs. When a sibling cries for help, all they care about is clutching their money. Success doesn't mean character. Below it were dozens of comments from old acquaintances, church friends, and former classmates of my dad. Everyone was heartbroken over the misguided but pitiful son, and outraged at the cold-hearted sister living in luxury who refuses to help her family. I felt like I'd been thrown into the mud and no one even asked if I wanted to be pushed. That day, I received an email from my father, Mr. Richard McKinley, who always liked to call himself the moral pillar of our family. Subject: Ultimatum. Think again before it's too late. Papa, your mother and I have endured enough. You've chosen to prioritize personal gain over family. If you continue to abandon your brother during his time of need, this family will no longer consider you a part of it. Remember, you can't have everything without paying the price. Your success didn't come from nowhere, it was built on your parents' sacrifice. It's time for you to give back. If you don't do the right thing, there will be consequences. I didn't know what made me angrier: the shameless threat or the blatant distortion of my efforts. Give back. I had been working since I was 16. I paid my tuition, bought my own meals, covered rent, without a single dollar from them. And now, he had the audacity to write that I owed them my success? A few hours later, I received 2 more calls, one from Uncle Ben, one from Aunt Evelyn, both of whom had been fed Mom's sob story for the past week. They sounded genuinely concerned about Mason. "Harper, we heard Mason is being threatened by dangerous people. Are you sure you shouldn't help your brother?" I gripped the phone, my lips trembling in frustration. Mason isn't in some life or math situation. He just wants someone to bail him out of a hole he dug himself. And now he's smearing me all over the place, just because I dared to say no. Aunt Evelyn fell silent, but I knew. I had planted a seed of doubt. I realized that if I didn't speak up, the lie would keep spreading, tainting my name with the same fake morality my mom preached every week to her church friends. That night, I opened my laptop, typed line after line, angry but clear-headed. I drafted an email to every relative, those who had only heard one side of the story. I attached screenshots of Dad's threatening email, bank records showing the hacking attempt, an audio clip of Mason yelling, "If you don't give me the money, you'll regret it." I wrote, "If any of you ever thought I was the ungrateful child, please read this carefully. If you've ever pitied Mason, understand the full picture. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for one thing only. Do not enable toxic behavior. And do not let the word family be used to manipulate you." After I hit send, I turned on airplane mode. I poured myself a glass of red wine. But that wine tasted more bitter than any night I'd ever lived through. I had told the truth. I had exposed them. And in doing so, I had accepted something. From this moment on, in their eyes, I was no longer the daughter of Richard and Elaine McKinley. I had no intention of ever seeing Jason again. I blocked his number, blocked his email, shoved aside every lingering emotion tied to that name. But when the bank sent me the official report of a second breach attempt, this time from a cyber cafe just a few blocks from Mason's place, I knew. Either I confront this head-on, or I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. I couldn't let this drag on like a lingering fever. I had to face it. Face him. That Friday night, I drove to the last known mailing address Mason used, a rundown apartment near Portland's industrial district. Before getting out of the car, I turned on the recording feature on my smartwatch, checked that my phone was fully charged, and slid a pepper spray can into my coat pocket. I wasn't there to beg. I wasn't there to plead. I was there to end it. The door opened after 4 knocks. Mason appeared, scruffy beard, sunken eyes, wearing a torn t-shirt, not a hint of regret on his face. On the contrary, he smiled like I had come bearing gifts. "So you finally showed up." I stepped inside, scanning the room. On the table was a pile of papers, bills, IOUs, scraps with strangers' names scribbled down. An old laptop was open, paused on a banking website. I immediately recognized the login screen. My login screen. The one someone had tried to break into just yesterday. I'll ask directly, "Did you try to access my bank account?" Mason didn't even deny it. He shrugged, casually, disturbingly so. "You weren't going to help. I was just speeding things up." I nearly lost it. But I remembered why I was there. I needed proof. And he had just handed it to me, with his voice and his arrogance. You know that's a crime, right? You think I had a choice? You pushed me to the edge. This is just shared funds. We're family. I stood there, stunned. Shared funds? Did he actually believe that? Or worse, had he been taught to believe that? I'm not this family's ATM anymore, Mason, and if you try again, I will press charges. Right then, the door burst open. I turned like a bad rerun. My parents stormed in. Harper, what are you doing? Mom shrieked. I'm collecting evidence for the police, I said coldly. Jason just admitted to hacking my account. He's desperate, Harper, can't you understand? When someone's cornered, they do irrational things. Dad's voice thundered. Loud, but hollow. Rational or not, you think theft is forgivable? Mom lunged forward, tears pouring. Tears I once believed, now saw as cheap performance. We're family, sweetheart. Family doesn't send each other to jail. I looked at the three of them. 3 different faces, one expression. Not regret. Just fury that I had refused the role of their financial scapegoat. I pulled out my phone and tapped play on the recording. The room froze as Mason's voice echoed, clear and undeniable. I was just speeding things up. Dad's face went pale. Mom took a step back. Jason still looked indifferent, like he hadn't grasped the gravity of what just happened. If any of my personal information is compromised again, I said clearly, every word slicing the air, I will submit this recording and the full digital trace history to the police. My mom opened her mouth, likely to protest, but I raised my hand. And if anyone from this family calls, texts, or lies about me, again, I will consider it harassment, and I will not show mercy. My dad finally spoke, his voice lower. If you walk out of this apartment with that recording, then don't ever expect to be welcomed in this family again. I looked at him for a long moment, then replied in the calmest voice I've ever had. Good, because for the first time, I don't need to be welcomed anymore. I walked out the door, without looking back. I drove straight home after the confrontation. No tears, no panic. Just an eerie silence, like after all these years my mind had finally been released from an invisible shackle. I sat down at my computer at 2 a.m. My hands didn't tremble. I opened the folder named Family Evidence, where I had stored all recordings, the bank's fraud reports, screenshots of threatening messages, and my father's ultimatum email. I had collected them over the past month as a survival instinct. But now, I didn't just want to defend myself. I wanted to be free. I wrote a public Facebook post. No flowery words, no complaints. Just the truth. I wrote about the favoritism, the manipulation, the endless help that was never repaid, and the ultimate betrayal. My own brother breaking into my bank account. I attached the recording of his confession, the fraud report from the bank, and my father's chilling email. I ended the post with one line. I will no longer stay silent to protect those who stepped on me to stay afloat. I will no longer feel ashamed for others' actions. From now on, the truth will speak for itself. I hit post. No hesitation. 3 hours later, I woke up to a storm of notifications. The post spread like wildfire. Family members, old classmates, Jason's former co-workers, even neighbors from the small town I grew up in, began commenting, sharing, and sending messages. Decades of silence had finally been broken. Cousin Tina from Nevada wrote, Jason borrowed $2,000 from me and then blocked my number. Now it all makes sense. Uncle Ben messaged, you did the right thing. The truth isn't always easy to hear, but it always needs to be told. The most surprising was a message from Jason's current roommate. I didn't know his past. After reading your post, I checked my stuff and found a credit card in my name I never opened. He's getting kicked out in the next 3 days. I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt lighter. A few days later, Jason got fired from his last part-time job, a small electronics store in South Portland. The store owner was an old high school classmate of mine, He read the post and called to confirm. I can't keep someone who tries to break into his sister's account working around a POS terminal. The next news came as an expected consequence. My parents deleted all their social media accounts overnight. All the posts about family is everything and ungrateful children vanished. Those who used to praise them started asking questions. My mom no longer shared photos of Sunday lunch with the family. My dad stopped preaching about traditional values in his golf group. According to Aunt Ruth, people at church had noticeably distanced themselves. No one believed anymore that they were victims of a rebellious daughter. Their reputation collapsed quietly, without me needing to say another word. And me? I started over. The following month, I received my promotion, officially becoming Director of Product at Lucentrix. My manager said, "Harper, you're not just talented, you stand for your principles. This company needs people like you in leadership." I didn't cry when I got the news. But when I stepped out into the parking lot that day, I stood there and smiled. For the first time, my success wasn't attributed to family support or being helped. It was mine completely. I also met Alex, a cybersecurity engineer I met through a professional conference. He was respectful, calm, and absolutely respected personal boundaries. When I briefly mentioned that I was recovering from an extremely toxic family situation, he simply nodded and said, "I'm here if you want to talk, and if not, that's completely okay too." That one sentence brought me to tears later that night. I moved into a new apartment. Smaller, quieter, with a balcony full of lavender and mint. No one knows the address except my lawyer and my closest friend. I installed cameras, changed my phone number, and cut ties with everything that once connected me to the chaos called family. Now my nights are no longer filled with my mom's message alerts or Mason's midnight money requests. They're filled with the clink of wine glasses between me and Alex, soft jazz playing from the Bluetooth speaker, and the wind rustling outside the window. I used to fear being cut off. But, it turns out, some ties, you can only breathe once you cut them. Harper's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the deepest wounds come from those closest to us. But from that pain she learned to rise, to set boundaries, and to choose freedom over distorted duty. She didn't just expose the truth, she reclaimed her life, her dignity, her finances, and her peace. What do you think about Harper's decision? Was she too harsh, or was it the only way to truly protect herself? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow this channel for more powerful family stories ahead.